Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another class guide for Lost Ark. Today, we are doing an overview of the Berserker, one of the 15 classes coming to the Western release. Initially, there are more classes in other regions, but these are the ones we're going to get first. So what this guide is going to be a review of the game design, the mechanics, the play style, what you can expect going into the Berserker, how everything functions together, and a very quick synopsis of what the Berserker is, how it feels, and all that. What it's not going to be is an advanced guide on what to pick, what abilities are best, how to use your tripods, what engravings to pick, what abilities should go on your bar, what to level with, any of that stuff. Because I believe if you're coming in new to an MMO, just play it first, have fun with it. You don't have to do tier lists. You don't have to figure out what the best absolute thing is. Just explore. And if you plan on maining the Berserker, play the class the way you want, learn everything about it, because all that knowledge you gain for everything, whether it's the best ability or the worst ability, is going to come into play later. And if they end up changing anything, like buffing an ability that was out of meta that comes back into meta, you still have that experience. So take that time to just really enjoy it. I'm not going to talk about any of the meta stuff because one, I don't think I'm qualified, and two, the meta between the three regions, Japan, Russia, and Korea right now is quite different. And I believe that Western Europe and North America are also going to be very different. And I'm sure we'll see new emergent gameplay and metas developing when we get the Western release of the game. But first, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Who knows? I might even be streaming right now. So we're on my Russian client here. I'm playing Berserker. Let's go over everything Berserker really quickly so you can kind of get an idea of what it is. And what you can expect. So first thing first, this is the melee attack, basic attack. A quick disclaimer here, the melee attack or the basic attack for all classes, for a lot of classes is quite irrelevant. You end up not using your basic attack at all. Some classes do, but it's nice to kind of get a vibe for it to see what the class is about. It's just a very basic 3-hit chain melee. You'll use this for breaking objectives and, triggering certain events, and use it for leveling and stuff like that. The movement ability is about pretty average. So when you use your movement ability, it is a 7-second cooldown. It's a relatively medium distance, medium speed roll. So it's just, it's not super fast. It's not super slow. I think it's just kind of some of the classes just have this very, straightforward, useful movement ability. And that's all you have to worry about. Next is the class identity. So this is what's going to be in the bottom middle of your screen. Every class has an identity. It's essentially a unique passive set or a passive, effectively, that defines the class, that makes the class what it is, and no other class has access to. And for the Berserker, it is your Berserker state. So it's kind of like a theory meter. If you play Berserker style classes, as you attack and hit with abilities, things like that, you can build up your rage or your anger gauge, whatever the translation is going to be called in the Western release. And when you have it full, you can activate it to go into Berserker mode. Bam! Then you start glowing red, and you got all these crazy things, depending on your engravings, but we'll talk about that later. And then you get this bonus of movement speed and crit chance. Attacks and movement speed and crit chance. You go fast, you move faster, you attack faster, which does affect your abilities. You get all crazy and angry. And then you also have increased crit. So everything you do is better, you're stronger and more effective. And then the bar starts draining while you're in it. And then while you're in it, you can activate Bloody Rush, which is this really cool, awesome effect where you just go over here and go whop. And it's just like this canned animation that does a bunch of damage facing in one direction. I think I can cooldown reset on this, right? And we can just kind of do that. So it's just a good way to dump damage, and that's your identity. Going into the ability set, you have a good set of abilities, some that are more mobility based. It's not like a split like some classes have where there's different categories that are very distinct. You have some that are big channels like this. You can jump down and you can do this. Most of your abilities, especially before you get endgame gear, are relatively slow and very directional, but hit very hard, can sometimes have some really good CC attached to it. So a lot of what your gameplay is going to be early on, especially while you're leveling, is just gathering a bunch of enemies up, putting them in the right spot, using your abilities, and just blowing them all away. So he's a little bit tankier than most because it's a warrior advanced class, which means they have more HP, a little bit more durability, higher armor as well. But it is a little bit slower initially. Now, one of the things that I will say about Berserker that's important to note is Some of the classes in the game are classes that start out feeling very different than they feel when you get geared and towards the current tier with good gearing. Berserker is one of them. I think Artillerist, Berserker, there's a couple others that they end up being very agility focused builds, which means they build a lot of agility, and you can see agility gives you attack speed, movement speed, cooldown. So as you get more geared towards endgame, Berserker starts out feeling really slow, and then the more geared you get, the faster you get. So when you hit endgame, you actually are pretty quick, and it has a nice, very reactive feel to it. You just won't get that initially when you first make your Berserker and you're leveling up. So keep that in mind, is that if you love everything about Berserker, but as you're leveling, you start to feel that like, this is a little too slow for me, just know that like if you're on the fence and that's the only detractor, it does get faster later when you have good gear. So going at the ultimates, the awakenings, these are your 2 awakening skills. You have 1 awakening slot. You can slot one of the awakenings into it, depending on, and you do this in PvP and PvE. And you have 2 of them available. The first one is Chains of Vengeance. This, I think honestly, I've seen both used relatively equally, depending on what tier of content you're in and which one you prefer. They both have good, I mean, some classes, they only use one because one just outperforms the other. This one, the chains, is very easy to use. You walk up, you press the button, chains come out, and you go boom, and damage. Woo! So you have very straightforward, very easy, not a super long animation. You do have super armor, all immunity while you're using it. You get damage on the initial hit, then an additional chunk of damage, and then they get pulled in, and you can knock them back at the end of it if they are targets that can be CC'd, and you do another burst of damage. So it's very straightforward, very easy to use. Jump into a big group of enemies and go bam. Very, very, very cool. The second one is Berserk Fury. This one probably, I mean, if there was one to be picked more, I think this one probably has more pick, but it depends on what kind of content you're in. And this one looks like this. You activate it, you charge, build it all the way up, your sword gets real big, and then you go slam. So the reason you might switch between the 2, I think this one has more damage overall, but obviously the big downside is that it is a charge, which means I am locked in place. I can turn, but I can't move. And then it's directional, right? So you have to make sure it lands. So it's this big wind up. If you're in an encounter that has a lot of movement mechanics, you have to dodge constantly. You may struggle to find a moment to use this one properly. But again, you can get modifiers that increase your charge time, and you get the right gear. You can actually make this quite fast. So, you know, it ends up not being a big deal. I think with Berserker, they are one of the classes that can pick between the 2 that they have, depending on whatever the encounter is and whichever one does more mathematical damage, because that's the way that they are. So that is the Berserker overall. Now, the last thing to cover for Berserker is going to be the engravings from a very high level. If you don't know what engravings are, it's an easy way to modify your character and specify your build further when you're at high level, at the highest level endgame. You have different ways to get engravings, either through your ability stone, your accessories, or your 2 engraving slots on your character. So you can equip, you grab one of the engravings, you equip it. Every class in the game has access to all of these general engravings, these combat engravings. They do tons of different things. They can be balanced and changed. We're not gonna go through what's best or what's worse. Just explore and figure out how these work and decide which ones you want to use. But what's important to think about is the class engravings. All classes in the game have 2 class engravings currently. These are unique to that class, so no one else has access to them, and they are usually very build defining. They change something about your character in a very significant way that's super powerful and can define your build. In a lot of cases, you have to grind these at late game. You won't really be exposed to engravings while you're leveling, but you will get these in game and they make a big deal. So the first one is Killer Move. This will probably have a different name in the Western release. So whatever it's called, this is the one that critical damage caused by Fury increases by 30%. And after exiting the Fury, the fatigue effect no longer applies to the Berserker. So Fury is your Berserk mode. So you have more critical damage in this, which means that you're basically playing around your Berserk mode. So while you have this, your Berserk mode is better. I don't have the engraving on right now, but if you did, it would be there. And then just like the Shadow Hunter, when you exit Berserk mode by default, so if I exit this and it ends, I have a cooldown period where I will no longer build rage while I'm attacking, right? So if I just exited Berserker state, there's a cooldown before I can even build energy towards even entering it again. But if you have this engraving, that cooldown goes away, which means that as soon as you exit Berserker state or Fury mode, you can start building Fury right away to go right back into it. So this specific engraving is around being in Berserk mode as long as possible and keeping it up as long as possible, and you can build more around that with the other systems that exist in the game to stay in Berserk mode. The other one is new to Russia on the Russian client. We didn't have it for the longest time. It's in Korea and Japan, but this one is Madness, and this one is very, very different. The rage bar is always 100% full, which means when you want, you can enter into not Frenzy, but Madness. When you enter into Madness, your damage dealt is increased, your movement and attack speed is increased, and all the damage you take is reduced by a very large amount, 65%, which means that you have like a good amount of defense in that, and all your damage up. So basically, while you enter into Madness, I believe you glow, it's like black and white lightning instead of black and red. So you're in this Madness state, supercharged all the time. You can exit whenever you want, but you have a downside, and that when you enter Madness, your max health cannot exceed 25%. So if you look at your health bar, it will stop at 25% and be blocked there. However, keep in mind you have 65% damage reduction, so you have lower overall health but higher damage reduction. You'll appear as quarter health, but you're pretty dang close to being full health anyways, just because you take less damage overall. So it's the risk that you're in this weakened state, but you're getting a benefit for it. So it's kind of like this this crazy berserk, like super berserk mode. And then when you exit it, you can exit it, get a little bit of your health back, and the Madness goes on cooldown, but most people will stay in Madness for the whole time. So this is like, I want a normal berserk mode with higher crit, and I want to get back into it as fast as possible. And then the Madness, which I believe is meta for almost all regions, if not all regions now, since Russia just got it like a couple weeks ago or a month ago. You activate Madness and you're just super all the time with some downsides, but those downsides are manageable and you're just dealing more damage overall. So those are the two class engravings for Berserker. There's a lot of other things to worry about when you're customizing your character, but these tend to be very build defining. So I wanted to cover it in this guide to just review how the Berserker works, what you can expect, how the gameplay gets modified, and how it goes into it. If you're looking for an overall view of all the classes that are coming out, I have that linked as well, a full class, like what class to pick. But that's the Berserker. So we're gonna finish up and go next to the next class. GG. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.